Hi guys, I hope you're doing well. In this video, I'm going to share a very candid conversation that I had with my friend who has taken both TEF and TCF. So we have tried to explain everything at the most granular level possible. We have discussed it section by section, and we have also tried to discuss pros and cons of each exam section by section. So I will let you watch this conversation and then I'll see you later on. So Rohit, before we jump into TEF versus TCF, do you want to talk about your French learning journey in general? Like, do you want to share anything?
Well, it is tough. It was tough as it is, I guess, with everyone. I endured much longer than you did because I took almost 2.5 years to finally get the magical level 7. But yeah, it was fun in parts. It was anguishing on certain days. But yeah, overall, uh, it was something which had to be done, and I would say it was a pleasant experience, all in all.
Okay.
Versus TCF, the first thing is, I until and unless we are at a certain level in our French journey, it doesn't really matter, right? Because both the tests are standardized tests, so it's more of like 19-21, जैसे we say in Hindi. So it's like almost the same, but we are just nitpicking on certain things when we are going to compare the differences. But there has to be a good base of learning before we start thinking in terms of should I do a TEF or should I give TCF.
Okay. Right. So, what would you suggest for anybody who is planning to take the exam? When is the right time they should actually start thinking about should I go for TEF or TCF? Because I know that as a beginner, we should not be worrying about these things, right? So, any timeline, anything you can say to people to really pay attention to this video, you know, when is the right time that they should actually pay attention to this video and actually start thinking about TEF versus TCF?
So I won't comment on the timeline, but I would say depending on the language journey you are in, because certain people reach certain goals at different timelines, right? But I would say if you are following a structured course like Alliance Française or even books, and if you're done with your B1 levels, only then you can start thinking about exam specific preparation.
Yeah, I think it is a very good point, and I think I also did the same till the time I reached B1. I didn't care about exams, and I was just focused on learning the language. Yeah, so it is a very valid point. All right. So for anybody who has not reached B1, that person probably won't be able to decide whether to go for TEF or TCF. So till then, just focus on the language, and then probably later on think about it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All
See,
right.
I thought a lot about it while I was not TEF versus TCF, but I thought about tests a lot even while I was learning. But I think all of it is just kind of a wastage of time. It doesn't add to the learning process, it just distracts you.
Makes sense. Okay. So probably let's now talk about section by section. So what do you have to say about reading section first, if you were to compare it TCF versus TEF?
Reading, I would say and there are certain parts of TEF which are much easier in reading, like the initial set of questions, uh, and even at the end, they are like those questions. The last 10 questions, they're like really simple, right? But then paragraphs, and some of them are like really tough. And second thing is the time management is quite difficult in TEF because they are like close to 50 questions, right?
Yeah, 50 questions, 60 minutes. Yes.
And in TCF, it's 39 questions. So the number of questions are lesser. So you won't feel rushed during your reading section in TCF. So from that perspective, it's slightly easier. Another part about TCF is the questions are sequenced in level of difficulty. So you know that question number 35 to 39 are the most difficult ones. Question number 1 to say 10 are the easiest ones. So and they carry the least weightage as well, right? So you can plan slightly better for TCF reading. But that being said, even the difficult questions, uh, the options can get really close. So choosing the right answer can. The other part of TCF is there's only like for one para there's only one question, so you don't get something like TEF. So in the long passages in TEF, you get like for one para you can get 3 or 4 questions, right? So here even for the one there is only one question to answer to. So the brain can get a bit drained because you have 39 passages to read to, and not like 7 or 8 large passages in TEF and certain small ones. But overall, I would say reading section is almost the same level of difficulty. It's just that the format is different. They are organized differently.
Right. So it is difficult to say like one is easier than the other. It really depends on your level of practice, maybe how prepared you are, not just with the type of questions, but also with time management and certain other things that you mentioned, right?
Sorry, TCF is slightly easier because the number of questions are less. And you can ignore a difficult question, right? In TEF, if there's a long para, like even if you're not getting it, but there are 3 questions or 4 questions which are linked to it. So you have to put your head into it, trying to decipher it. You cannot leave it like that. But in TCF, you because it's just one question.
Right. Okay. So it makes TCF slightly easier. And I guess you also get the result instantly after you submit your answers, right?
Yeah. It starts with listening and then reading. So once you're done with your reading, you get your listening and reading results together.
Okay. Got it. Okay. And what about listening?
Listening, I would say TCF is more difficult compared to TEF because of a couple of reasons. One is you hear audio only once for all the 39 questions. There are no repeats. Second bit is you can't even read the question. So when the test starts, when the audio plays, you only have options in front of you. You don't know what the question is going to be. So if it's let's say conversation between 2 friends discussing something, now you may be focusing on, okay, what is Tanu's response, and the question might ask what is Rohit's response to it, or perspective for that same topic, right? So so the question is played at the end of the audio clip. So
you really have to pay attention to the audio, and you really have to make sure that you understand what people are discussing, because you're not looking at the questions at the same time. You would be looking at the question later on.
You can read the options, but even for that, there isn't sufficient time. It's like hardly 1 or 2 seconds, maybe 3 seconds just to read the options. So you can maybe read 1 or 2 options just to get a background perhaps of what the conversation is going to be, but that is also not necessarily going to be helpful.
Okay. And do you get extra time in TCF in listening section to change your answers later on or review your answers?
Yeah, in TCF, after the listening test is done, the reading section starts. But say if you are able to manage your reading section properly and you have, say, some minutes left, you can go back to even listening section and review some of your answers there.
Okay.
Or maybe if you're something altogether, you can, even if you don't remember what the audio was, you can just click some option, right, rather than leaving that question altogether.
Okay, so you have the option to change your answers or to answer a particular question for which you were probably not able to select the answer. But I don't know how much helpful would that be, because that would be helpful only if you remember the conversation, right? Otherwise, it won't be very helpful. And in listening, everything happens so quickly, like one after the other, that the chances of remembering the conversation is very low. But still, you have the option to change your answers. But in TEF, we don't have any option. Like, question changes instantly from one after the other, and then you can't really go back and change your answers.
And sorry, another difference between the two, again, for listening, again, you have like one question per audio, so there aren't any long passages. So I would say the maximum audio clip plays is about 60 to 90 seconds. So there aren't like really huge audios which exist in TEF, that 40 to 50 section, right?
Yeah.
They're like really, but here it's like most of it is like 60 to 90 seconds, I would say, TCF. If someone has a comfortable level in listening, you can go for TCF. But if you're struggling with listening, then it's better to stick to TEF.
Right. Okay. And yeah, I see many results of people wherein they struggle with listening section the most for TEF. So for them, switching to TCF probably doesn't make sense, because in TCF, listening is very tough.
In TCF, the question bank is lesser. So you get like these series online on certain websites, or even on those Facebook groups. So I think it's about 25 or 30 series which exist. And if you've gone through those series, there's like a good chance that you'll find at least some questions which are coming out of those series. So like the chances of repetitions are higher in TCF as compared to TEF. Even if two questions get repeated out of something that you've already done, and even that can be a difference between getting a B2 and not getting a B2, right?
Okay. And this is true for both listening and reading. In listening also, questions do repeat?
Yep.
Okay. Because I think it's not as common in TEF, in listening section. In reading, questions do repeat, but not so much in listening. And for TEF, we have this Facebook group wherein we have a lot of practice material for reading, and then we have Prep My Future. What about TCF? I think you have shared one website with me, which I'm going to put in the description box below. Otherwise, on Facebook group, do you think they share good practice material?
I've shared a Facebook group as well with you.
Yes.
So people do share their experiences. And then, so we've so far talked about only listening and reading, but even in writing and speaking, there is a lot of repetition. So people do share their experiences on that Facebook group. So one can practice the recent or even the non-recent ones, just to build up a solid base of writing material and even speaking practice, and that would help during the exam.
Okay.
So there's that website that I've shared. Then even Prep My Future has a TCF module. Yeah, but when I had purchased it mostly to see how the writing format is, how the speaking format is. But I remember that in speaking, the instructions that they had given were not matching with how speaking exam took place for me. Even though Prep My Future explained things really well, like in listening and reading, if you make a mistake, then it has an explanation of what is the right answer, why that is the right answer. Now, those sort of things are not available on other websites, both for TEF and TCF.
Right. But for TEF, I think Prep My Future is really good for mock test. I have not really practiced writing on Prep My Future. I've only used it for listening and reading and section specific preparation, and if I have any doubts. For that, Prep My Future is really good. Not sure about TCF.
Given the standard that Prep My Future has set for itself, I expect the same kind of standard with TCF exercises as well for listening and reading.
All right. So what about writing now?
Writing, for me, like in TEF, writing used to be my toughest problem, especially in section A, because I used to be so afraid of the fare they were, whether I'll get a topic for which, whether I'll have the vocab or not, whether I'll be able to precisely write something or not, whether I'll be creative enough during the exam or not. So for me, writing definitely was a challenge in TEF. And in TCF, the first difference is there are three parts in TCF, unlike TEF, which has only two. So you have to be really conscious of managing your time. But then the word limit for each of those tasks is lesser as compared to TEF. So talking about task one, it's really small letter where you may be writing to your friend to take off your house in your absence or things like that. So it's a general day-to-day stuff, a simple of 80 to 100 words, something like that, 60 to 120 words. I think that's the limit. So it can be really small. Then task two is about they give you a situation that, okay, whether you attended some concert, give your review, you went to a restaurant, explain your experience, things like that. So, but again, from a day-to-day life, and that's also, I think, yeah, that's 120 to 150, the word limit. So not a lot to write. And section 3 is where they give you two passages. So you have to read those passages, summarize them in 40 to 60 words, and then give your own opinion on that same theme for 120 to 80 to 120 words. So basically the same topic, you get counter arguments in two articles. So you have to summarize what it was about and then give your opinion of it. So the second bit of task 3 is kind of like section B, but with just one or two arguments, and you would be done, right, with 80 words.
Right. Okay. Yeah. In section B of TEF, we have to write about 200 words, and we generally write 250 to 300 words. So, and we have to be very conscious of the, the structure that we use in TEF. So in TCF, in section C, for example, wherein you have to summarize what you have read, do you really have to practice a lot to make sure that you, follow a certain structure so that you are able to wrap it up in, say, the word limit that is being provided?
I would say you can use certain connectors just to practice as the Tondik, Premier Pal, the blah blah blah, Nea Moa, Ilia Dotra. So there can be some structure that you can just formulate by yourself. But the thing that you have to be conscious about is don't write something which is not already there in those two paragraphs. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes we can overboard as well, right? And then we won't be respecting the task completion. The task completion is to summarize, not give your opinion in the summary, right? For summary, for your opinion, there is a separate para that you have to write in any case. The other part, when you talked about word limit, is you have to be conscious of that your summary doesn't go beyond 60 words, because if it does, you will be penalized for it. Other than that, like you mentioned, that in TEF we had that tendency to write 300 words, 250 words, right? Something like that, right? So all of that is penalized in TCF. Okay. And I didn't really try it during my exam, but I had read that you cannot even write beyond the word limit. The keyboard won't work if you are to go beyond that certain that word limit. But I didn't try it, so I don't know. But again, if you don't meet that parameter for each of those tasks, the minimum and the maximum words, then you'll lose marks.
Yeah, so basically for comparison purpose, if you think about it, because topics are general from day-to-day life, and in section C you have to summarize, it can be little easier than TEF, but it really depends like which format you are more comfortable with. Like I was very comfortable with TEF, specifically for writing. I've never thought about taking TCF per se, but I was very comfortable. So for me, I would say if I were to compare what you have just explained and TEF, I would still say for me, TEF is easier. So I think it depends on person to person, right? And on your practice level for each of these tests, right?
And I would say in TCF, the time management is also slightly more difficult for writing.
3 sections, yeah.
Like 3 sections, you have to switch off from one task, move on to the next one, switch off again, move on to the next one, right? So,
You get 60 minutes
yeah,
for all 3 sections?
it's up to you to manage how much time you want to allocate to each
Right.
of the tasks. Do it in sequence: task 1 first, task 2 second, and task 3 third. I didn't follow it. Doesn't really matter. But if you, in case, miss, let's say, completion of task 1, then perhaps your paper won't even be evaluated. Like in increasing level of difficulty. So task 1 is the easiest.
Right.
Task 2 is 1B2, and task 3 is to evaluate C1, C2. So they expect you to have a A1, A2 before they can evaluate B1, B2, right?
Okay. So, but once you are done with all 3, can you go back to section 1 and 2 just to review and make any changes? Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go in order, right? You can start with any section you want. Okay. That's the same thing for TEF also. Okay. And do you get virtual keyboard in TCF?
Yeah, I was just going to come to that. The virtual
Okay.
keyboard is like I struggle with the virtual keyboard even in TEF as well, but in TCF, the virtual keyboard is quite small, so it doesn't take your screen space. Like in TEF, it
Yeah.
does take about big screen, but then in TCF, it's the other way around. It's like it's really small box, and if you have to like even to see okay which accents, you have to like really get close to see whether I'm using the right accent or not.
Okay. Yeah, so virtual keyboard, I think, has its own challenges in both TEF and TCF. In TEF also, I remember sometimes when you just open it and you close it, then you're not able to scroll down and you have to press enter a couple of times. Otherwise, your screen just gets stuck. Yeah, so there are some challenges.
In writing, so it's generally again some, I don't know how many number of sets are there, but then in writing again those set of questions. So if they're like about 7 or 8 texts circulating, then they stay the same for almost a month throughout the world. So it's like just the same. Like if you've written some of those things earlier, there's like a very high chance that you would just get the same thing in your test. So
Okay, so that means that in TCF, questions do circulate very frequently in
yeah,
reading, listening, writing, and probably in speaking also, right?
yes, in speaking they keep changing every week. So
Okay, yeah. It's not quite often in TEF, although in TEF also we have a certain list of or theme of questions, but it's not, the probability is not as high as TCF. That's what you're saying, right? Okay. All
the
right.
probability is high. Changes that they do, perhaps it do changes, but like it's like a little bit of changes in that same theme. So you can just use or just adapt whatever you had practiced.
Okay. So what about
Yeah.
speaking?
Okay. Speaking, it's a tricky area. But I would say even when I was comfortable in speaking in TEF, and after that I opted for TCF, right? So I was intimidated with task 3. Just and before when I started preparing for it. So it has again 3 tasks. Task 1 is really simple. You have to introduce yourself for 2 minutes, I think. Yeah, 2 minutes. So you can like prepare for it now and give your exam a year later. It's the same introduction, right? And at the end of your introduction, or even like in between, the examiner may ask you something on whatever aspect you were talking about, right? But then task 1 is like quite easy. You can easily manage it. Task 2 of TCF is the same as task 1 of TEF, which is that you get a question and you get some preparation time and you have to then ask questions about that situation. But here the duration is lesser, so it's like you get, sorry, the preparation duration is more. You get 2 minutes to prepare, and then to ask questions, it's a shorter window. It's 3.5 minutes of interaction, of trying to get information about the topic. But again, I would say the for this section as well, the topics are more of day-to-day life, because in TEF you can get like weird questions as well, right? That you want to go for some weird activity, which
Go to a forest. I got this activity in section A. For some recreational activity, ask 10 questions.
yeah, sometimes the mind can get blocked, even though we practice for it, even though we have those set of generic questions which we had prepared for, right? But even then, sometimes it may get difficult. While in TCF, first is to get more prep time, so you have more time to organize your questions. Second is the topics are more routine, so so you should be comfortable with that topic. So the task 2 is also easier. Then coming on to task 3, that for that you have to practice a lot, and again you cannot fake a B2 or a C1 level in that one, because you get a topic and you don't get any time to prepare, and then you have to do a monologue for 4.5 minutes straight.
Which is scary.
On that.
Monologue is scary. Yeah.
So, but it looks intimidating, but like once you get a hang of, like in TEF section B writing, you have those themes, right? Certain themes, even for writing, for writing, you have those certain themes, like social themes. There can be topics about, say, television, old guys, sports, whatever. So it's like really like societal questions, and you have to give your monologue. And even for monologue, once you start practicing for it, you start getting your structure organized. That okay, I'll start with a basic intro. I'll try to pick up certain keywords from the topic itself, and just try to develop that while I think of some ideas of how to organize, and it gets easier with time.
Right. So if I were to summarize it quickly, in both TEF and TCF, there is one section which is very similar, wherein you get an advertisement and you have to ask 10 questions, and your examiner is going to play the role of the manager or the person from the company, right? In TEF, you get only 1 minute of preparation time. In TCF, you get about 2 minutes. But in TEF also, at times I've realized that if you are not overexcited and tell your teacher, oh, I'm done, they kind of give you slightly over 1 minute. That's what I've seen. The second section in TEF is wherein you have to convince your friend to participate in some activity. It's a conversation with your friend. And I feel that although it is tough at times to convince because they keep challenging you, but when they are talking, you still have few seconds to think, like, what do you want to say next? And you can take a pause and think. But in TCF, because the last section is a monologue, you have to talk on a particular topic. Other person is not going to say anything. So, and you have to talk for 4 to 5 minutes, which is a long time, right? So it can be a little bit challenging. So if you were to compare, because you have taken both, so which one do you think was easier for you?
I felt a difficulty to be the same in both. Okay. I was intimidated with that task 3 in TCF, but once I started preparing for it, like I like barely 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks for TCF, and I was able to easily manage that. So, but I would say I think one important thing I forgot even in writing. So in TCF, in speaking, you get evaluated out of a score of 20. So if your score is above 10, it's B2 level. And in TEF, we have to get 450 out of 699, right? Yeah. Which is close to 65% compared to 50% here. So I definitely felt it even in my scores in writing and speaking between TEF and TCF, that, as I was saying, I gave those exams in a time span of like 3 weeks, and in TCF, I easily cleared that benchmark, right? So I got 12 and 13 in writing and speaking. While in TEF, I had like one side failed in writing, one side failed in speaking before that. Uh, so there wasn't that struggle of just crossing the threshold. So I was able
Right.
to easily cross, even though like I had the same level, right? I was the same person.
Yeah, so their scoring methodology is also slightly different. That also makes some difference. It's not just about
Yeah.
the difficulty level of the exam. So from that perspective, you're saying that for writing and speaking, it it was little easier for you in TCF. But
Yeah.
again, it
Yep.
depends on person to person, right? Because if I were to think of taking TCF, I would not, because my listening is very bad and I'm very scared with TCF listening section specifically. So for me, TEF is better. But yeah, somebody who is comfortable with listening like you, probably TCF is the right choice, right?
Yeah.
But do you want to
Yeah. I would say
summarize
so.
it overall? Like, do you want to add anything else to summarize it overall?
One more important factor, which kind of can be frustrating in TEF, is that you don't have an option to get uh, your marks reevaluated, right? Because if you feel
Yes.
that, okay, I know I did well, but why is my score not reflecting it, right? So in TCF, you can get your writing and speaking reevaluated. And I personally know people who have got it reevaluated and uh, successfully. So from 9 to 13, someone moved from a score of 9 out of 20 to 13 out of 20 with a reevaluation. So, so that in TEF, we just have to we don't have any option, right? Then to appear for that exam again, even if you feel that has been something wrong in the evaluation. So you can overcome that in TCF.
Yeah, it is a very, very important point. In TEF, reevaluation is not possible. And what would you say to people, like if there is somebody who is not able to clear TEF couple of times, should that person switch to TCF or should they stick to TEF? I'll give my perspective. For me, I would say I would still stick with TEF because I know the format and I know that probably I need to push a little bit harder, just prepare for a couple of more weeks, and then I would be more comfortable with that rather than starting from scratch for some other exam type, right? So what would you say to, like, you switch from TEF to TCF, which was a very brave decision. I would not do that. So what do you suggest? I know it's a personal choice, but what do you have to say?
So for switching from TEF to TCF or even from TCF to TEF,
Vice
I
versa.
would
Yeah.
first is your scores. So if you are getting somewhere in 300s and while the expected score is 450 plus, right? In that case, you shouldn't really be worrying about which test to give, but you should just go back to the drawing board and start, revisiting the basics and strengthening your base rather than focusing on the test. That said, if your score was like closer to your desired score, um, then if then it's a matter of if, right? If you're able to evaluate and nitpick, okay, this is what went wrong, this is something that I can work on and improve upon, then you should stick to the same test rather than switching to the other one. But if it has become kind of random in terms of like, yeah, I think I can control it or I don't know what went wrong, then perhaps it's time to jump ship. For me, it was more of like I had given TEF 3 times and failed in different things, right? So first time I failed in both speaking and writing. Second time I failed in writing. Third time I failed in speaking. So so for me, it was kind of, I was fed up of that format itself, and especially as right for writing, that section A was really difficult for me. So even though my whole attention was on writing, and I failed in something different in my third attempt, so I was like, even if I'm able to overcome whatever went wrong in my speaking, the writing was going to be iffy for me. So that's why I said, okay, let me move on to TCF, and it worked for me. But then again, it is a personal choice. And then uh, you have to see the score, your scores as well, before deciding on switching from one format to the other.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah. I think you have summarized it and compared it pretty well. And I think it's up to people to decide which one works best for them. I think for all four sections, we have discussed almost everything, but there are some other things also that people keep asking, like what is the fees? The result is valid for how long? So I know TEF and TCF both results for both the exams are valid for 2 years. What about fees for TCF?
This is almost the same. I think 22K something.
Okay. So it depends on the country. In India, for TEF, it's about 25,000, and for TCF also, it's between 25 to 22 to 25,000 rupees, right?
Maybe a couple of thousand cheaper.
And how long does it take for them to release the result?
Okay. So if listening and reading are your areas of anxiety, then TCF has a better news because it gives you the result instantaneously. And but then in general, it takes time, because for the writing and speaking and the consolidated result, it takes them about 2 weeks, roughly 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
While in TEF, you can get it like within a week as well, right?
Yeah, in TEF, on their official website, they have now mentioned they've changed their timeline from 4 to 6 weeks to 2 to 4 weeks now. But mostly they release results in say 7 to 10 days, but sometimes in just 2 to 3 days. So I think it depends on the center and also the time of the year when you are taking the exam. But it's
Yeah.
very quick, like maximum a week or so.
Another thing in TCF is you don't get a like an e-result. And in TEF, the email that we receive, that PDF, that's in TCF. It's not. You have to go physically to the center to collect it.
Oh,
Your result. And even though
that's weird.
this thing, a PDF, sorry, not a PDF. Yeah, they give a PDF, but with a watermark, duplicata, and you have to collect the original at their center.
And any other weird thing that you can think of? Like I had no idea about this thing.
The thing is, I think the number of centers are less for TCF, but as compared to TEF. One more thing, that website, tcfca.com, right, that I shared with you. There, for TCF, you can get that person had broken down the questions in terms of how many marks you get, because some people also are keen to know, right, that what is the weightage of each question. So for TCF, you can at least predict it, that okay, first 10 questions are 5 to 10 marks, 10 to 15 are this much weightage. Then the last ones, like 36 to 39 questions, are like a weightage of about 40 marks per question. So you can judge by the question number itself, right, in your exam, that okay, my difficult ones are tricky, right, because then that one question make or break your score. So you can get that breakup for TCF, while for TEF, it's like we can just guess, right?
Yeah, we know that weightage differs by section, but we don't really know how. So yeah, we have no idea. Thank you so much, Rohit, for taking out time for this.
No problem. Cheers.
I hope you have found this video helpful. I just want to mention one very important point. Don't just go by what we have said, because whatever we have discussed is based on our personal experience. So before you jump onto any conclusion, before you decide which exam you should take or not, please do your own research. Please identify your own strengths and weaknesses, and depending on that, please pick the one which works out best for you, TEF or TCF, right? And all the online resources and Facebook groups, everything that we have mentioned about in this video, I'm going to share the links to those in the description box below. So yeah, that's it that I wanted to share with you guys today, and I wish you all the best with your exam preparation, and I'll see you very soon next week. Till then, take care. Bye.